Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry, from design experts like Scout Driscoll, who works with wineries to create labels that evoke their unique story, to today's guest, Alexi Cashen, whose logistic insights enables wineries and distilleries to efficiently transport their products around the globe. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. Alexi, in short, if you're a business looking to retain a winery or craft beverage producer as a client, Barrels Ahead will figure out a plan to make it happen. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Mike Province. On last week's show, Mike and we talked about the challenges independent wine and spirit retailers face when competing with the big box chain stores. I am super excited to talk with today's guest, Alexi Cashen. Alexi is the co-founder of Elenteny Imports, who helps wineries and distilleries transport their brands around the globe while navigating the many roadblocks like customs, taxes, and our confusing three-tier system here in the US. Alexi's background in the wine industry, it spans almost 20 years. During this time, she's worked in nearly every side of the industry, from hospitality and retail to wholesale and supplier. This breadth of experience has enabled her to create a logistics business from the ground up with a solid understanding of how it all works. Welcome to the show, Alexi.
Thank you so much for having me, Drew.
Oh, thank you for being on. Thank you for being on. So, Alexi, tell us a little bit about yourself and your history. What led you into the industry?
Well, I would say making ends meet led me to the industry. I was a post-grad in Boulder, Colorado, looking for English, secondary English teaching jobs, which were few and far between. And so I started waiting tables in Boulder, Colorado at a restaurant called The Med, beloved to many. And quickly learned that I would increase my my income and tip average if I actually knew a thing or two about wine and spirits and could engage my guests in a more artful and honest way. So I spent a lot of time with the various bartenders and distributors who sold to the restaurant to just sponge as much information as I possibly could to really understand the general framework of alcohol. I didn't grow up in a family that where alcohol was super present. I hear that a lot of, particularly folks with kind of European descent or influence where, they grew up enjoying food and wine as a family. And, aside from drinking, Coors Original canned beer, my dad would maybe sometimes have like a rusty nail or something that was like as exotic as it got. I was really clueless about, aperitifs and cocktails and digestifs and, just other things aside from table wine that really can enrich a meal dining experience. So it was really formatively the hospitality industry where I cut my teeth.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I came from my family was very similar. There was the occasional Mai Tai and Chablis, but there was no fine wine. And I also
definitely not.
Similar experience. I had a degree in philosophy, and with a degree in philosophy, you're going to figure out what are you going to do. So I started a wine store and drinking wine and buying wine there.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Hospitality. What sort of takeaways did you get from that side of the industry when you started in hospitality?
I personally feel very that the takeaways are plentiful. I will personally see to it that my 3 children each work in a restaurant at some point in their young life. I found just the amount of, I don't know that work ethic is necessarily built in restaurants. Maybe there's a little bit of nature and nurture there that you kind of have to come to it with some drive and chutzpah. But I really appreciated about the hospitality industry, just the camaraderie, the fast-paced environment, and just the centeredness around service, around food, around the integrity of cuisine, around the storytelling, whether that's, chef's creation for the night or stories about the winemakers or the regions, from which the wines that you're talking to tables with, or even tasting before a shift and learning with the wine director or a somm, it's a really complete experience in terms of, really coming to appreciate all of the elements of hospitality. But really the work ethic, I think, was my strongest takeaway.
I can see that. And I can see that setting the seeds for your future logistics business, because a restaurant needs to work on a particular time frame. And you're the delivery method. If that's broken, the restaurant's broken. The other thing I love about hospitality is it gives you a chance to actually see the wine, experience it right where the rubber meets the road. You see the enjoyment right there. When I started in retail, unless we were at the wine tasting bar, it was always handing the bottle to the person and hoping they'd come back one day and tell me if they liked it or not. But you get to see that immediate pleasure and experience firsthand, I would think.
Yeah, you do. Kind of being a part of the guest's experience and enjoyment of wine, especially when you're turning them on to things that are, not as common or a little outside of their normal comfort zone or go-to style of, their wine purchase, turning them on to something new or a region they've not explored or a varietal they haven't tried, or, even just wine pairings, which I think is really fun. It's a sort of very explorative space for both consumers as well as front of the house staff that are really servicing them. To me, I think my career really dovetails with sales at every juncture, even if I've worn sort of slightly different hats along the way. I think that my sort of innate desire to sell, which, sure, I admitted I wanted to increase my tip average, right? There was some selfishness involved there.
That's just being smart.
Well, but the art of really getting somebody to enjoy what they're buying, or to flesh out their experience in a way that's meaningful, or whether you're selling then wine in later stages of my career, selling through a distributor to restaurants, then there's more to it than just the push of the sale. It's like, how can I actually benefit this person I'm selling it to? How can I make their business work better? If I'm selling to a restaurant or to a retailer, it allows you to practice listening. Well, I think good sales skills require just paying attention, getting really curious. It's not about having the answer. It's in most cases being able to ask the right question.
Oh, that's a really good point. It's not so much telling someone it. Yeah, I love that. It's about asking the right questions, and you learn those questions as you move through the industry, and you've worked in nearly every aspect. What was your favorite role aside from your current position here at co-founding Elenteny?
Gosh. So I would say, sort of a cheat of an answer, it's not necessarily the role that I feel kind of most akin to, but it's the function that has come up for me several times throughout my career. I don't have like a huge sort of philanthropic desire or anything like that, but I have a strong desire to be of use. It's sort of like my personal why, if you will. Just Alexi, just be of use. Like that is kind of what I aspire to be and to do. And so, I think about, I did some training early on in my restaurant career with new wait staff who would come on. And this is before I was even promoted to any managerial positions. Just because, I also, not for nothing, had a teaching degree, and, sort of like the notion of, how do I educate or fill this person's cup up? How do I set them up for success? And I think it's that role I've played of where I have been of use throughout my career that I find the most satisfying. So from restaurant experience to, as I mentioned, as a wholesale sales rep selling to restaurants, being able to be useful, to be helpful to the restaurant in terms of like what's really going to make their wine program sing, to then being an entrepreneur, and in my current stage as a CEO, being a listening ear, or not just the leader of my company, but the mentor for my managers who are really executing every day on a high level. And I sometimes I think my job as a CEO is not to be a leader, but to create leaders who then create other leaders. So I kind of like playing with that framework. And then I'm also very involved with an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global org that has different chapters throughout the world. And I've been a part of the San Francisco chapter. I've been on the board. And then I've most recently in the last year and a half worked with their accelerator program. So I work with entrepreneurs who are trying to get their business, their revenue to at least $1 million as a starting ground. Oh, wow. And so that coaching role it's very rewarding for me and feels very germane to my kind of personal value system of wanting to be of use.
Oh, wow. What in this accelerator program, what type of businesses have you worked with?
All different types. So the neat thing about EO is that it doesn't really matter what your business is. We all tend to have similar needs, complaints, fears, desires that dovetail, again, regardless of industry or even business size to some degree. So the folks that I'm working with currently one woman's a winemaker, which happens to be the only one that's really unique to my industry. But then, somebody else does personal executive coaching. There's somebody who's creating cannabis products for influencers. There's a gentleman who owns a wonderful business that does pet euthanasia, like at-home pet euthanasia. So it really, spans the different industries, segments. It's a lot of fun.
That must be so awesome to see all the different, just to be able to get your hands on all the different ones. As a marketing agency, we go breadth, and I just love diving into each different business's practices, what makes them unique. But again, like you mentioned, they all have similarities. What are some of these unique, or not unique, but what are these common challenges that you see all these businesses facing as they're trying to grow to $1 million in revenue?
One thing I'm working on with this group, and also with my executive team at Elenteny Imports, I might sound like a broken record to everybody, is goals. I find that it is a hang up for people. Like, even to just understand, well, what are SMART goals? Or why should I follow them? Or what do I do when I get off track with them? So I have been almost a little dogmatic in the last quarter about just goal setting, starting a new year, still kind of waiting in the midst of a pandemic, which doesn't affect all businesses, but certainly has affected many. And so I have noticed that my own business, Elenteny Imports, as well as some folks within the EO world and my accelerator group in particular, have just lost focus on some of just those very simple goal setting exercises, where I think now more than ever, it's essential to, it's essential, but it's also a little obtuse because the future is really murky. It's hard to have a deep, a more clairvoyant sense of really where we're headed when there's so much headwinds that so many different businesses are facing. But like, even just the subtlest goal, right? Like, and I don't mean, revenue goals. Like, sure, you want to get to $1 million in revenue. Like, yeah, I understand. That's like a revenue benchmark. Or, a business wants to grow, have certain, X percentage growth year over year. That's just like smart, healthy business metrics. Those to me aren't goals. Goals are sort of like, what are the tiny actions that I can take that are actually going to propel me forward, that are actually going to create wealth, that are actually going to create profit, create growth, create, and it's like, if you just think about the numbers, it feels a little shallow to me. It's like, well, why do you want to create $1 million business? Like, why do you want to grow double digit, year over year as a healthy business? Create more jobs, create more of a again, kind of back to the abuse piece, and my business, my logistics company is a service-based business. So, I want to help more importers. I want to help more brands. I want to help more people out there, which is why Tim Elenteny and I founded our company in the first place. So I think the goal setting has been one of the biggest key focuses for a lot of my work in that mentoring space.
That is so important and such great advice. And so getting started, everybody's got their big goal. I want to make $1 million, but you don't know why. And you're so right there. And that's setting that first small goal. How do you get to the next goal, See, achieving $1 million is really probably, 100 small goals achieved. And you can get gratification that you've achieved half of them versus this one. If I make $1 million or not, it's a success or failure. You've got successes along the way. That's so important.
Yeah. Well, I think our neurology just isn't built for that of like, oh, I need to like hit this revenue goal. Well, yeah, because when you don't, then you use the term failure. Nobody wants to feel like, failure. And, I was listening to a webinar with Chip Wilson, the founder of Lululemon, and, how he talked about like, you have to fail 50% of the time. Okay, like I can understand and appreciate that type of tenacity gets built by having setbacks, but I personally haven't looked at my quote unquote failures with that sort of negative stain. To me, it's the English major in me. It's always down to semantics, but it's like, yeah, there's setbacks, there's challenges, there's hurdles, there's headwinds, there's things that have made me stronger and given me, grit and, inertia. And I'm just smarter and wiser kind of the next time around. So sure, I guess you could call those failures, but I don't find that type of nomenclature very motivating. Like I certainly don't for my sales team either. And to have kind of arbitrary numbers to hit that are way too, that's how I love the SMART goals, it has to be smart, relevant, attainable, measurable, time bound. Like if it's not attainable and it's, then there's no kind of point focusing on it, because the real dramatic effect we have, I think, when we track things and measure things, you call it a goal, call it an objective, a rock, whatever it is, I find that if you can create ways of, giving your body like more dopamine hits, more serotonin in that experience of measuring and counting, then it's going to be more rewarding and motivating to keep going. Whereas if you constantly have kind of arbitrary numbers and you're not hitting them, I find that very demotivating.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of goals, so you and Tim founding Elenteny Imports, that was probably a million small goals achieved and a lot of challenges. What were some of the challenges you faced? We're actually going back for a second. What was your guys' motivation for doing Elenteny Imports?
So Tim and I both worked together at Polaner Selections, a very long and loved New York-based importer and wholesaler. And we, both of us, Tim having built businesses in the past, both in wholesale and hospitality, he had experience that I was very drawn to, and also I personally had some aspirational entrepreneurial ideals. And, living in New York City at the time, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And, I was just piqued by kind of a number of different ideas that we brainstormed. And then, coming up with the logistics idea, it made sense because there weren't a lot of competitors in this very niche space that we occupy. So we're a service-based company. Our clients are other US importers, and those importers are utilizing our services for freight forwarding, so like ocean freight shipping, container shipping, federal compliance, and all the logistics from picking up at winery and getting it to your warehouse across the US, as well as distribution services, where we actually take possession of the inventory and then resell it to the trade, whether that's to other wholesalers or to restaurants and retailers across the country. We manage all of the order fulfillment, compliance, inventory management, and all of the third-party expenses therein. So that was an existing model to some extent that we saw a real opportunity to compete, first and foremost with customer service.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very proud of the fact that we have spent and continue to spend resources and energy just continually trying to be better and trying to service our customers in a way that is memorable. We still get most of our business from word of mouth, which as a marketer, I'm sure that sounds kind of fuddy-duddy to you, but it's
No, that's
100%.
the biggest thing in the industry. I mean, the wine industry is word of mouth.
It's word of mouth. It's word of mouth. It's such a tiny industry. And so what does that mean? Like, who do I need to be marketing to? My existing customers. So, back to that be of use, like however we can, in addition to the services we provide, fill them up with information, knowledge, resources, real-time information to be this relied upon knowledge base has been part of our strategy to compete in this service, this alcohol service distribution and importation space.
That's fantastic. What sort of challenges have you guys faced? I mean, I know the last year has been full of challenges, but early on, some of your initial, like getting bootstrapping this company and getting it built up.
Yeah, normal aches and pains. I think starting a business is difficult. Capital is everything. And we were really struggling in the beginning with having it was 2010. So, still smack in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Really struggled to have kind of bank lending options and, had to rely upon some angel help in those early days. So, I'd say capital was the most difficult thing to overcome in the early days. And yet, I've talked to people about a lot of the diversity and equity issues going on within this industry, and talk about inequity, like, the ability to get capital or to, have friends and family who would support you, or, those are things that I find myself very lucky and very privileged in order to have those resources to help keep my business afloat in those early days. So despite its challenge, I'm also aware of like the unique advantages that we had in those early days. And, I'd say kind of the other major one is just like once it started to stick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once we started to feel the fruits of the early year labor to, then start to see traction and, more customers coming on and, needing to hire more people and just staying on top of that wave of, you're kind of in a rush of growth is really challenging. It feels, it feels very frenetic at times, and just like the growing pains of kind of growing up. Like
Mm-hmm.
I remember being at a holiday party. I don't know, call it 5 years into the business, and one of my compliance manager, Marissa Willerat, who I have had her on my podcast, and she looked at me and she's like, "Alexi, look at what you've built. Like look around this room, look at all these people." And honestly, it didn't even dawn on me, because it's like it just had all grown like so organically and like inch by inch, step by step, that it was really kind of the first time that I stopped to look around and realized, wow, like we have a really dynamic, solid team, and we're able to provide jobs and really grow this team and grow the company. And what a gift that is.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, the past year with COVID and pretty much the world shutting down, I know you've navigated you must have navigated a ton of logistical issues with freight forwarding and just getting actual boats across the ocean. What advice could you give people going forward in the next year? I mean, you guys have I do want to point out on your site, you have a news section. You do a great job of keeping everybody up to date on the latest shipping challenges. What advice would you give importers and just, people in general trying to move product across the world right now?
I don't know that I have advice to give aside from just reiterating the facts that we're all experiencing. I don't rely upon advice a lot because it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of, it's not one size fits all. There's businesses are in different places and needs and with their demand planning. So, there's no kind of silver bullet here, but what we're seeing is obviously kind of two significant types of delays with boats waiting at the dock and then containers that are stuck at port and backed up. And really, it's just across the supply chain, there's just a complete struggle, which is so unfortunate on the heels of the wine tariffs being suspended. That was supposed to be great news. And then yet everyone was like, wah, wah, wah. Like, we're still in this very challenging state. So it's a challenge because costs are rising and they're rising across the entire supply chain, whether that's from the steamship lines, costs at port, trucking costs, you name it, like absolutely everything's going up. And one of the things that I find the most frustrating in this industry is that everyone else's costs continue to go up, throughout the supply chain, whether that's, the actual logistics companies and that's thusly put onto importers and, distributor costs go up and, my healthcare costs go up every year to my employees and rent goes up and like everything goes up and up and up. But the consumer still has this demand for like the $10 glass of Prosecco or the $12 glass of Pinot Noir. And it like at some point, like we've got to get like the whole experience to shift economically. I think there's a real inequality where everybody else is continuing to like take a haircut, like all the way up the chain. And, not that I want to sabotage consumers, but like those price rises from a consumer expectation of like, what is of value? What do I want to pay? Or I don't want to pay more than $20 for a Sauvignon Blanc or a bottle of rosé, right? There's these limitations and these like glass ceilings on sort of consumer expectation of price that have to change.
That's a good insight. And the other thing I took from what you were just saying is be a little empathetic and patient because everyone's going through these struggles together right now, as far as getting product and moving product. Yes,
for sure.
So talk to me. So you've been in many different roles in the wine industry and currently logistics. Logistics is the name of the game. What's next for you in the industry?
Well, I created a new company in the last year, which was sort of a fun creative project to be exploring while I was stuck at home during COVID and not traveling, which was my normal rhythm. And I created a brand. It's a new spiked tincture tonic. It's called St. Hildie's Botanica.
Spiked tincture. How does that work?
Yeah, well, we're intentionally avoiding the term seltzer, which is like all the rave, and creating a new category of alcohol, which is in essence a tincture tonic. Tinctures are herbs and florals that are steeped in alcohol. And so that's sort of like a normal medicinal herbal tincture. Like
a bitter or?
Sure. Bitters are an example of that. Tincture is just sort of the style in which you're preserving steeped herbs and roots. The ones that we've selected to put in our tonic is, so essentially it's, we're taking these herbs and florals, spritzed with real juice. So organic juices, sparkling water, and then a little bit of booze. So it's low alcohol, bubbly, functional beverage. So the herbs and adaptogens that we've put into our beverage are the piece that's sort of it's the magic. It gives it this functional additive. We've chosen adaptogens that and adaptogens are best explained that it calms the nervous system. So whether you're kind of like a high-strung person or kind of anxious, it'll calm the nervous system. If you're feeling sort of low and maudlin or moody, it can help like amplify and elevate your nervous system. So it's sort of this like these wonder herbs that are used obviously in holistic settings that my co-founders and I personally use. And so it was fun to just envision creating a drink that actually has this better for you alternative ingredient, as well as like no fake flavors, everything's real, organically made, and still in that kind of canned format. So they're 12-ounce sleek cans, and we're launching in California in June.
In June, perfect for the summer. It sounds like a great summer drink.
Yes.
What is the name of it?
St. Hildie's.
St. Hildie's.
Yeah, Saint Hildie's. The name comes from this 10th century mystic. Her name was Saint Hildegard von Bingen, and she was a mystic and known as the mother of plant medicine. She was super into science and cosmology and botany. A very outspoken woman within the Catholic sector, which is really significant given that she was alive in the 10th century. Just a badass, to be honest. So it's a lovely muse to create this beverage, given her story and background.
Sounds awesome. So coming to market in June, and will be available in one flavor or multiple flavors starting out?
Yeah, we're launching with 3 flavors. There's a lemon turmeric, elderberry hibiscus, and a guava ginger. So I'm very excited. They're delicious.
Oh, that is awesome. So when, I read in your bio, and I didn't read this part, you enjoy champagne and oysters on the beach. What is your favorite way to eat oysters? I'm a big fan of oysters myself.
Yeah, it's so random. I'm from a landlocked state. I grew up in Colorado, and so I did not grow up eating oysters at all. It didn't go well with Coors Original cans. But no, I kid. But I do love oysters, and where I live in the Bay Area, north of San Francisco, I feel super blessed to have access to beaches, and as well as just a lot of local oysters. So that's a fun pastime for my family. We love going up to Tamales Bay, which is north of Point Reyes. And there's lots of little spots along the way there that you can enjoy oysters. And, yes, my favorite wines in the whole world are champagnes. And, it's a perfect pairing.
One of my favorite memories, and it's been about 5 years since I've been up there, maybe longer, and I don't even know if that place is there, but Hog Island Oyster used to be able to rent a barbecue and get a couple bushels. And I really didn't know how many oysters were in a bushel. I ended up getting 3 bushels for the 4 of us.
That's a lot.
I think I overdosed that day, but we ended up barbecuing them with some compound butters, and then we had rosé. We didn't have champagne, but it was one of the most memorable days of my life.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So beautiful and serene out there.
That's fantastic. So, Alexi, where can people find you online? And definitely tell us about your podcast.
Absolutely. So like you, Drew, I have a podcast and love chatting with folks in our industry. I launched about a year and a quarter ago. So it's been a super fun project. AlexiCashen.com is where you can find more information on the podcast. And you can reach me with regards to any logistics needs. My email is alexi@elentenyimports.com, ELENTENY imports. And my Instagram handle is Alexi Cashen as well.
That's awesome. And where can people find out information about St. Hildie's?
So that is launching again soon. Both website and Instagram handle is Drink a Hildie.
Awesome.
So drinkahildie.com, and then follow us on Instagram.
That's awesome. So today we've been talking with Alexi Cashen and learned about her new venture. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Drew. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.